On January 5th, 2021, the Teen Think Tank Project met for the first time, embarking on a path that will lead them to meet multiple amazing people on the track to learn more about social protest in sports and all that goes along with it. One of the first people our research group looked at was Dr. Richard Lapchick. From business.ucf.edu, Lapchick is a human rights activist, pioneer for racial equality, an internationally recognized expert on sports issues, and scholar and an author. He's often described as the racial conscious of sport. He brought his commitment to equality and his belief that sport can be an effective instrument of positive social change to the University of Central Florida, where he accepted an endowed chair in August 2001. Lapchick became the only person named as one of the 100 most powerful people in sport to head up a sport management program. He remains president of the Institute for Sport and Social Justice, formerly the National Consortium for Academics in Sports, and helped bring the national office to UCF.
Welcome, Dr. Richard Lapchick. It is a privilege to have you joining us on Here's the Problem podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
And I'd love to just start with, how did you start with building a life and a career at the intersection of sports and social justice?
Well, it goes way back. Literally, when I was 5 years old, I looked outside my bedroom window in Yonkers, New York, where I was being raised, and saw my father's image swinging from a tree with people under the tree picketing. And for several years after that, I'd pick up the extension phone in our house and hear racial epithet after racial epithet being hurled at him. As a 5, 6, and 7-year-old, I had no idea what it was all about, except that a lot of people hated my best friend. And as I got older, I was able to appreciate that what it was about was, as the coach of the New York Knicks, he had signed the first African-American player in the history of the NBA, Nat Sweetwater Clifton, a week before the NBA draft that year, when Syracuse drafted Earl Lloyd and the Celtics drafted Chuck Cooper, and they became the first 3 black players. The league is now 80% black, but in 1950, there were a lot of people in this country who didn't want it to become that. They wanted an all-white league.
From our meeting with Dr. Richard Lapchick, we learned that America has not changed much, as we are still fighting a lot of the same issues, and those issues affect people of color every day. Also, we learned that sports brings these issues that people do not want to talk about to light in a way that otherwise would not have happened. The next person we are going to look at is WNBA player Essence Carson. Essence Carson is a social activist and 13-year WNBA veteran. Carson has been very influential recently during the Black Lives Matter protests, and she lent her voice to many platforms to spread knowledge about social issues that are affecting the lives of women and people of color today.
Essence, thanks for joining me this morning. Really great to have you.
It was good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So here's the problem: sports and social justice. And just saying that phrase conjures up a diverse array of reactions. This year's WNBA season was certainly unique for a lot of reasons, pandemic aside, but in the sense of the league fully embraced social justice and social protest movements that really made you stand out from other organizations.
Of course, as players, we took a stand this year. We definitely took a stand. There were so many people that were willing to not suit up and head out there on that court, because this issue is bigger than the game of basketball, right? We're talking about the game of life. I believe it initially started out as player-led, and then I believe the league ultimately joined full-fledged. And you can't ask for, in that time, what we were asking for, there wasn't much else you could ask for. The idea was to be able to use that platform for our cause at any given time, no matter what. And that was a compromise that we came to, That was the only way that you would get us down to the bubble, is if we were allowed to use our platform for social change.
Thanks to Essence Carson, we were able to see that the players were the ones who started the movements, causing the teams and organizations to follow. Carson taught us that if we want to protest, we have to be willing to sacrifice. Carson let us see into the eyes of a woman social activist heavily revered in her field. She showed us how women in the WNBA have a lot more to lose comparatively to men in the NBA because of their popularity. However, this still has not stopped them from trying to make drastic social change. Finally, we will look at our meeting with Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, to me, was a former NBA player. He was a third overall pick in the NBA draft and former player for the Denver Nuggets, Sacramento Kings, and Vancouver Grizzlies.
I see him as a leading figure in sports protest and as a quote-unquote predecessor to Colin Kaepernick due to your protests during the national anthem in the NBA.
So Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf is not just about basketball. He's a convert to Islam who's inspired by Malcolm X, consumed Islamic literature, and also found a conflict between his religion and standing for the flag.
And because of that conflict, in 1996, he was suspended by NBA Commissioner David Stern for not standing for the national anthem. But after one game of that suspension, he came to a compromise with the league, stating that he would stand for the anthem, but would continue in protest by bowing his head and praying during it.
Do you realize that you've had an impact on change, right? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do when you hear the fact that you hear people talking about it. There's an impact, but how much of an impact we won't really know. And sometimes in the process of changing something, you change. Like the thoughts you had initially may evolve to become something even bigger. Martin Luther King, for example, in the end of his life, he wasn't the same Martin Luther King that he started off as, and a lot of leaders weren't. He mentioned to Belafonte in one of his meetings, he said, listen, and I'm paraphrasing, I think I messed up. I think I've integrated my people into an already burning house. He began to think differently on how the world was. He said the biggest purveyor of violence in the world is American imperialism. These were things that he didn't see or didn't communicate and articulate before. So sometimes where you start off is not where you end. And sometimes the things that you do may not be felt in your lifetime. But other people, just like the seed you plant, they may reap the benefits of what you've laid and what you planted. But as Richard Itten said, a political scientist, he said that we have to caution against viewing protest, against viewing resistance as inherently revolutionary. He said, because once it becomes routine, it's easily accepted or anticipated by the dominant authorities and therefore easily molded and shaped into their hegemonic understanding of things, which to me meant that, you know, when protest and resistance become fashionable, right, it loses its power. And we have to be careful not to allow that to happen.
Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf gave us the first account of how professional athletes who are trying to make social change are treated. Mahmoud taught us that in order to make social change, we have to be radical and not to be afraid about saying the truth, even if it may hurt someone's feelings. Mahmoud finally showed us that we are all humans first, and then politicians and athletes. Thank you for listening to our process of learning about social protests in sports. We hope that what we have learned will contribute to effective social change in the world. We would also like to give a special thanks to everyone else who offered their insight on social protests in all of its forms. Your work and knowledge is very much appreciated.